welcome to 3 Rail Steve, and in today's video we will be painting and texturing the scenery from the previous video. So first of all I'm going to use a can of brown primer paint which I got from B&Q, and I'll spray it all over the area around the tracks and also over the tracks, so just basically painting all of it brown. It's a nice rust colour, this particular type of paint, and this primer is important because it's quite hard to spray acrylic paint directly onto rails, but if you've got primer underneath then it should take much more efficiently. So now I'm going to clear out off all the tops of the rails, or most of them, using this track rubber. The only exceptions are the closure rails, since these need to be insulated from the third rail pickup of the locomotive crossing the points. If you look at the reference photographs that I have, you can see that the entire area is really sort of covered in this rust colour. So it's easier to sort of like deal with this now before I put any ballast down. And so this is kind of just to make it look old and weathered rather than sort of shiny and new. So, and obviously once you clean up the tops of the rails and you start to see a good result, it starts to look more realistic. Of course, the one part of it that's probably not very realistic is the middle rail. So when I paint it, I'm going to try and downplay it a little bit by the way I spray paint it. But I don't know, I still quite like the look of it. I think 3 rails are a very attractive looking system. So once I've cleaned all this up, the next step is to move on to airbrushing. So I've just got this little compressor, and I must confess I've never used an airbrush before. So the first colour that we're going to actually put down is some black. So I'm just going to get my airbrush. I've had a few little practice goes with it, and track down some black spray paint. So it's just an acrylic. I've actually bought it to paint up a locomotive, but it's spare, so I'm going to use it. So I've got the compressor on, and we're just going to see what we can do with this. So I've got this little, just a pipette, so that's why I'll drop a few small amounts into the cup of the airbrush. Looking at the thickness of the paint, it looks reasonably well thinned down. So you're kind of looking for a consistency, whereas if you say you've got a paintbrush and dabbed it on the side of the cup, it just about drips down back into it. I don't want any thicker than that, obviously, because you're just going to clog up the airbrush. And we'll just see how this goes. So the aim really is to pick out all the sleepers and the middle part of the rail in black. So I'm just going to go over it sort of quite lightly. So paint, spray the middle. So this kind of simulates the sort of amount of muck that would be left on the track when locomotives crossing it, and also it brings back up detail of the sleepers. And also, like I said before, you can kind of, by spraying black in the middle, you can kind of make the third rail a little bit less noticeable. So I'm just getting on with that. It's just sort of the usual spray technique. This is the reason I've not used this airbrush before, is I was thinking, well, if I use it on scenery, if it goes a little bit wrong, it's not kind of the end of the world, and it's a good way of basically teaching me the process of how to use it. So this airbrush setup I bought from Amazon, I think it was probably like 2 years ago, and it's just stayed in the box, and I've kind of been waiting to use it after I moved. I like it because it's a compressor with a tank, which means it's not on all the time and doesn't get too hot. And the actual airbrush, it's a really cheap, generic Chinese one. I think you could probably pick them up for £20, but it was 2 of them were included in the kit. And so far, it seems to give a really good result. I'm quite surprised. It doesn't splatter. The spray pattern looks good. You can get some quite nice kind of sort of shading effects with it. As I'm sort of spraying down the middle of the rail, you can sort of kind of see it looks okay, probably even better than okay. So for now, I think for what I'm using it for, this will do me. Although probably some later stage I'll probably, to get more into airbrushing, I will just probably get a better one. You can get like a hardened steam back, but they're about sort of £100, but maybe they are worth the investment. But for now, this will do. So as I said, I'm just spraying, trying to just bring up all the sleepers, so spraying the sort of middle bits and obviously the edges as well on the other side where they stick out the side of the rail. So I'm going to also spray up other elements of the scenery. So I'm actually going to spray all these dry stone walls mainly black, trying to actually get into all the nooks and crannies of the dry stone wall, and I'll try and maybe even out some of the colour of the road as well in a bit. But just for now, just going to get these walls sprayed. Not completely black, but pretty black, and then probably we'll do some other painting over the top of them to sort of bring them back. But I think it's important that these sort of nooks and crannies are a dark colour to give them a bit more kind of pop and drama. The noise you can hear, I think, are my next door neighbours. So everything is now darkening up quite nicely. I'm sort of getting the road a sort of a more even colour, ready for more layers of paint. So I've watched quite a few other YouTube videos, and other creators do seem to use black quite a lot as a sort of the starting colour, if you like, to create things three-dimensional. So basically the sort of darker, the shadow, the bits that you can't really see. I have even seen people spray paint the sort of earth part black before they apply static grass to sort of give it a bit more contrast, but I feel that probably is a bit too much contrast, and I'm going to be aiming for a different effect on that. So I've now moved over to brush painting. So I've painted all the areas that are going to be earth, and in artist acrylic, and the colour is raw umber, diluted, sort of toned down with a bit of white, which looks almost grey, but if you actually look at earth, it is generally quite, especially in the hot weather, is quite sort of, it's between grey and brown, I suppose, and this is quite an ideal colour. I come from an artist background. I do a lot of oil paintings, and raw umber is a colour that you use a lot when you're painting landscapes, especially things that sort of fade into the background, because it's quite grey really. Whereas if you want something that's got a bit more oomph, then burnt umber is a more sort of solid brown colour. So again, using artist acrylic paint, I'm just going to paint up the sort of the sides of the layout. I've used masking tape to sort of bridge any gaps. So just going to pop some black just to make it look a bit more tidy, and then I'll leave it for a bit, but I'll probably do something a bit more permanent. I might use some more better paint, or I might put some more card or something over the top of it just to make it look a bit more tidy. But for now, this will be enough. I just need it not to be white. I just need it to be a black colour, so it doesn't sort of interfere with the look of the top of the layout. These acrylic paints I'm using, you can sort of pick them up from Hobbycraft or The Works, and they're not particularly great quality, but they work quite well on this kind of project. Obviously if I was doing something probably more of like a painting, and I would probably go over to something like Rowney or one of the other sort of more well-known makes of paint, sort of artist quality. And I guess the difference between different qualities of these paints is the level of actual pigment in them, how many particles of actual colour you get. So when you sort of think that something is cheap, you kind of get what you're paying for. So if you buy like a very good quality artist paint, then it will have more pigment in it and will cover more quickly. Whereas something cheap, then you probably have to go over it several times to actually build up the density of the colour. But for projects like this, cheap acrylic paint is absolutely ideal, or whatever you've got lying around. I'm just basically going through my art box and finding things to use. So I have got a lot of acrylic paints, although actually my main medium when I'm doing paintings, I actually normally paint in oil paint, which I find there are lots of reasons why I use oil paint. One of the main reasons is it doesn't dry too quickly, so you can actually play around with it and get the the desired effect. Whereas acrylic paint, especially in this hot weather, will dry within minutes. Really, it'll be touch dry. An hour or so, it's completely dry. But for this, it's absolutely an ideal material. So other elements like this road, for example, I've painted in just a basic acrylic grey paint that comes sort of in a big tub that I found somewhere. Obviously we'll be doing a bit more work on that, but for now that's a pretty good base. It's a decent representation of the road in the photographs that I have. So I'm now just going to start using a dry brush technique. So it's paint basically straight out of the tube. I've dried it off on a piece of tissue paper, and I just want to sort of lightly brush the top and try and get it to sort of vaguely match the house that we put back. So because presumably the house is made out of a similar material to the dry stone walls, so I'm not going to get it exactly the same, but I want sort of the tonal values and the sort of overall look to be as close as I can get. So I'm using a burnt sienna colour, so it's been just knocked down a bit with some white, and I'm just sort of gradually adding that, so with a dry brush, so it just catches the tops of the sort of the detail. So that's sort of the first kind of step that you do. So this needs to be reasonably subtle. So you've already, because there's already black on these walls, it should make all sort of individual stones pop out a little bit. So this is the first sort of part of it. So once you've got all the sort of rounds in place, then you kind of want to sort of add some highlights. So I'm just going to use white with a tiny bit of the burnt sienna colour in it to pick out all the areas where the light would hit. So really the top of the wall and sort of the corner edges. So I'm sort of trying to brush in one direction, and this should actually sort of make the wall look a bit more, stand out more, I suppose, in the landscape. Again, it's quite a subtle effect and you can easily overdo it, which I have done a little bit, but it still looks pretty good. I'm fairly happy with it. I really do quite enjoy this process. I'm always very happy when I've got a paintbrush in my hand. There's something about creating something with very sort of simple materials and making it look as real as you can. It's the sort of same thing with when you're creating artwork as well. I do a lot of portraits and things, and I like to sort of make them look as real and sort of vibrant as possible. So rather like a painting where you start off with an underpainting and a sort of like a tonal painting on top before you actually move on to colours, this is just kind of a broad base before we start adding other details to it. So it's important to sort of get the basics correct to start with before we start adding more sort of intricate details, which I'll get onto in the sort of rest of the video. But all this is quite important to get looking as spot on as you can. And if you can see if you look at the walls and then look at the building, you can see that sort of that tonally they're beginning to sort of look similar, or similar enough anyway. So I've just got maybe a few areas of grey on the road just to sort of touch in bits that I've missed. So I want all that a fairly consistent colour. So if we apply any effects on the top, it's going to sort of blend together nicely. I know roads have sort of different shades in them when you look up close, but when you stand back, they do sort of have a kind of unifying look to them. So I'm just going to pick out the edge of the pavement, the curb, in a lighter colour. So this is grey, tiny matte grey mixed with white. So looking at the photograph that I've got, you kind of get a highlight. The sun hits it and it just picks this out as a sort of a white line. So I think it's quite important to sort of put that into the scenery, just to sort of give a bit of definition to where the pavement is. And probably at a later stage I will paint the pavement a slightly lighter grey colour as well, so that it contrasts with the road more, because when you look at photographs of pavements, they're often in a sort of a lighter kind of concretey, I don't know what the material is, but I guess it's another form of concrete maybe, whereas the road is made out of tarmac, so there was definitely a colour. Even over time, when they the colours sort of kind of get a bit more similar, there was a definite difference in look. So the next step is to add some ballasting. So I'm just going to pour some ballast that I've got sort of had for quite a long time on the track, and I'm just going to spread it around with a paintbrush. I probably put a little bit too much on there, but hey ho. So let's get this paintbrush, and we just want to knock it in between the sleepers, and obviously form a sort of a shape on the edge of the rail, the other side of the rail as well, to create sort of the shoulder. Although all this area, looking at photographs, just looks like it's just basically plastered in ballast. So I'm just going to gradually work that in with that brush. So the aim is to get the ballast between the sleepers without any bits of ballast sitting on top of the sleepers, because when you look at real railway track, as the trains pass over them, any stray bits of ballast just gets gradually sort of vibrated away by the action of the train. So you can sort of see I've made some progress. Also, you don't want any bits of ballast that will interfere with the running of your railway. So I'm just applying a mix of isopropanol and water, about 50-50, so it's kind of like wet water, and just soaking all the ballast with this stuff. And then I've diluted some PVA in a little dropper bottle, and I'm just adding that on top. And the isopropanol mix means that it actually the glue is absorbed into it and creates a good bond. And it dries nice and clear as well, as you can sort of see down this end of the railway. Obviously it all kind of looks a little bit scruffy still, because there are bits of ballast on top of the rail, but it's easier to just try and get as good as you can before you do it. But it's easier just to kind of let it dry out, and then the next day you can remove all the stray bits. Hello Max. Oh, this is my neighbour's cat, who often likes to visit me when I'm working on my model railway. The thing you mustn't do, which is very tempting, is to interfere with it while the glue is drying, because you just basically mess it up. It's far better to wait for the glue to dry and just kind of pick away at it until it looks good. The other thing to bear in mind is if you've got a set of points like I've got on the end of this section that we're doing, I tend to ballast it a bit more lightly anyway, but every now and again it's actually move the point that's crossing and then you make note of it, just make sure it still moves, so the glue doesn't get a chance to set on it, which I'm just going to test now. So if you just watch it, it does actually still function. It's a bit of an odd point motor, this one, the way I've got it set up, because I left the springs in in the points. So basically it just nudges it across and then the spring takes over, but it works absolutely fine. Once you've cleaned it all up again, it's handy just to run a locomotive over it just to make sure it all still functions properly, which it seems to be fine. The end of the point doesn't work because a bit of warming's come out, but I'm fairly happy with that. So I'm just looking back over some reference photographs and deciding what to do next. And I think the thing we need to do next is to go back over the rails. So we want some of the black to actually be on the ballast to simulate the train running over the top of the rails and dropping muck onto the rails, and also to try and maybe tone down the the middle rail a bit as well. So I'm just going to go over with black and just try and pick those things out again. So it's just a case of building it back up to a sort of point where you're fairly happy with it. And it should make the ballast just look a bit more integrated with the rail rather than sort of being such a stark colour. And probably what I'll do as well, I've got some brown ink. I'm just going to probably change colours, and I'm just going to spray up brown ink that goes to an airbrush quite nicely when it's quite subtle. I'm just going to spray over again to sort of simulate rust bleeding into the ballast and try and make it look as much like the photograph as I can. I don't know if you look at the road, you can see I've already airbrushed sort of oil marks into the road. This is photographs are from like the 1950s, and cars did regularly dump oil, and you used to get these sort of black sort of lines going along the road, and it kind of gives a bit more texture and interest to the road as well. So just picking things out. There's a photograph of what it would have looked like back in the day. So it's just a question of using the airbrush and picking out little details, really. So I put some elements of scenery back, like the signal box, the gates, some cars and the station house, just to see what it all kind of looked like. And I'm interested to know what the sort of background I should use. So the next few shots I've used an AI to just add a background to it, to give me some ideas about how to paint the backdrop. So you can see it's coming on quite nicely actually. It looks pretty decent, I think, considering all the buildings are made of card. Yeah, let's just see what this looks like. As I said, this is all AI generated. So looking at the ones with the cloudy sky, I think that's probably a look I'd like to go for, because a cloudy sky doesn't generate too many shadows, and you don't get a lot of shadows on model railways, so I think that would probably best suit. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you on the next one. Bye.